Chelsea's words still burn. Sometimes I wonder if she even knows what's happening anymore. In the crowded bookstore, her smirk cut deeper than the chill off my Oregon lake. The scent of polished wood and ink surrounded me, but her mockery, calling me old-fashioned, implying I was senile, shattered my pride. I'd poured my savings, my dreams, into this place for Scott, my adopted son, only to be humiliated by his wife. What she didn't know was I'd already sensed her lies, her concern a mask for greed. My silk scarf trembled in my hands, but I wasn't broken. I'd uncover her plan and reclaim my legacy. How do you fight the ones you love when they betray you? Stick around to find out how I turned her scorn into my triumph. Before we dive back in, tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments. If Chelsea's betrayal shocked you, hit that like button and subscribe. Tomorrow's story is extra special. Something wasn't right. I felt it in the air, thick like the damp mist rolling off the lake outside my Oregon home. At 70, I'd learned to trust that itch at the back of my mind, but standing in the crowded bookstore, I couldn't pinpoint why my stomach churned. Was it the way the investor's eyes skimmed over me, or the faint smirk on Chelsea's lips as she adjusted her sleek blazer on stage? I'd poured my heart into this place, my money, my dreams, all for Scott, my adopted son. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a moment to stand tall beside them. So why did I feel like a stranger in a room I'd helped build? I smoothed my silk scarf, its soft rustle grounding me against the hum of voices. The bookstore smelled of polished wood and fresh ink, a scent that once felt like home. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a burgundy dress, modest but elegant, despite Chelsea's snide comments about my outdated taste. She'd said it lightly, like a joke, but her eyes never laughed. Scott stood beside her now, his broad shoulders stiff, avoiding my gaze. My boy, the one I'd raised from a shy camper to a man with a future, seemed a world away. The event began, and Chelsea's voice cut through the chatter, smooth as glass. "We're thrilled to share our vision," she said, gesturing to the crowd. I smiled, proud, until her eyes locked on me. "Of course, we owe so much to Helen," she continued, her tone syrupy. "Though bless her, she's a bit old-fashioned, isn't she? Dressing like she's lost in time." Laughter rippled through the room, sharp as thorns. My cheeks burned. I gripped my purse, the leather cool against my trembling fingers. She wasn't done. "Sometimes I wonder if she even knows what's happening anymore," she added, her smile ablade. The words landed like a slap, and the room spun. I remembered the day I adopted Scott, his small hand in mine after my husband's funeral. I'd given him everything, my savings, my support, even the equity in my lake house to fund this bookstore. And now Chelsea stood there, turning my sacrifices into a punchline. I wanted to scream, to demand why, but my voice caught, trapped behind years of keeping the peace. An investor nearby whispered, "Poor thing, she looks confused." Pity, not respect, colored their glances. My heart pounded, each beat a reminder of my foolishness. Had I been blind? Chelsea's concern for me, her offers to manage my finances, her insistence I was forgetful, suddenly felt like a script. What was she planning? I slipped out, the cold night air biting my face as I clutched my purse tighter. Chelsea's words echoed, but something else stirred, a fire I hadn't felt in years. She thought I was too old to matter. She was wrong. I'd find out what she was hiding, and I'd take back what was mine. Why did I give so much? That question gnawed at me as I sat in my lake house, the silence heavy after the bookstore humiliation. The moonlight spilled through the window, silver on the hardwood floor, but it couldn't erase Chelsea's words. Her smug, "too old to matter," still stung like salt in a wound. I traced the grain of my oak table, its roughness grounding me. The house smelled of cedar and thyme, every creak a memory of the life I'd built. But now, alone with a glass of chamomile tea, its steam curling like a ghost, I wondered if my sacrifices for Scott had been a mistake. Had I poured my heart into a dream that Chelsea was twisting into her own? I closed my eyes, and the past rushed in. 25 years ago, I met Scott at a summer camp in these Oregon hills. My husband, Tom, was still alive then, his laughter warm as the campfire we sat around. I could still feel the scratch of my volunteer badge against my neck, the smoky air tickling my lungs. Scott was 8, a quiet boy with eyes too old for his face, abandoned by parents who never came back. Tom saw it first. His potential. His need. "He's special, Helen," he'd said, squeezing my hand. When Tom died of cancer a year later, his absence carved a hole in me. Adopting Scott was my way of filling it, of giving love a place to grow again. I opened my eyes, the memory fading like embers. The lake outside was still, reflecting stars I couldn't name. I'd given Scott everything: my time, my savings, my dreams. I worked extra hours grading papers, the ink staining my fingers blue, to pay for his college. When he and Chelsea wanted to start the bookstore, I didn't hesitate. I invested my savings, even took a loan against this house, its walls now whispering my foolishness. The breeze from the lake slipped through a cracked window, cool against my skin, and I shivered. Had Scott forgotten those nights I stayed up, balancing checkbooks so he could chase his future? Chelsea's arrival changed everything. I remembered her first visit, her heels clicking on my porch like a warning. She was all charm then, her smile bright as the sun glinting off the lake. "You're Scott's rock, Helen," she'd said, her voice honeyed. "We're so grateful." But her eyes were sharp, scanning my home, lingering on the antique clock, the deed on my desk. I wanted to believe her gratitude, but something felt off, like a note played wrong in a song. I brushed it aside, telling myself I was paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. I stood, my knees creaking, and walked to the mantel. A photo of Scott at 16 stared back, his shy grin, my arm around him. I'd framed it after his high school graduation, proud of the man he was becoming. But lately, he'd grown distant, his calls shorter, his visits rare. Last Thanksgiving, I'd set the table for 3, the scent of roasted turkey filling the house. Scott and Chelsea arrived late, and he barely spoke, his eyes on his phone while Chelsea steered the conversation. "You should rest more, Helen," she'd said, her hand on mine, too tight. "Let us handle things." I'd smiled, ignoring the chill in her words, but the empty chairs that night felt like a omen. I sank into my armchair, the fabric worn soft by years. What had Chelsea done to pull Scott so far from me? Her concern for my health, her hints about my memory, were they part of a plan? I remembered a moment last month, her voice low as she spoke to Scott in my kitchen. "She's not herself anymore," she'd whispered, thinking I was out of earshot. Scott didn't argue, his silence cutting deeper than her words. My tea had gone cold, its bitterness sharp on my tongue. I'd trusted them, but trust was a fragile thing, and I felt it cracking. I walked to the window, the lake a dark mirror under the stars. In town yesterday, I'd overheard whispers at the cafe, the clink of mugs punctuating gossip. "Chelsea's got big plans for that bookstore," a woman said, her voice low. "Wonder what Helen thinks." The words lingered, heavy as the fog rolling in. Did the town see something I'd missed? I pressed my hand to the glass, its cold biting my palm. Chelsea's charm was a mask, and I needed to see what lay beneath. My gaze fell to the old recorder on my shelf, its tape dusty but intact. I'd used it for lectures years ago, capturing stories for my students. Could it capture Chelsea's truth? The thought sparked something fierce in me, a resolve I hadn't felt since I stood up to a school board for my kids' education. I wasn't done yet. But what was Chelsea hiding, and how deep did her betrayal go? What was Chelsea really after? That question clawed at me, sharp as the wind whipping across the lake outside my window. I'd spent days replaying her words from the bookstore, her mocking "too old to matter" echoing like a taunt. The air in my Oregon home felt heavy, thick with the scent of cedar and suspicion. My fingers brushed the old recorder on my desk, its cold metal grounding me. I'd trusted Chelsea, believed her concern for me was real, but now every memory felt tainted. Was she playing a longer game, one I'd been too blind to see? I needed proof, and I needed it fast, before her whispers about my forgetfulness became a cage. I started at the bank, the place where my gut told me answers hid. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like my nerves as I approached the counter. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, slid a stack of documents toward me. "Your account statements, Mrs. Stroud," he said, his voice flat. I clutched the papers, their edges sharp against my palms, and sat in a corner. The air smelled of stale coffee and ink, and my heart thudded as I scanned the pages. There it was, a remortgage application for my lake house, my signature forged in Chelsea's precise handwriting. My breath caught, the room tilting. She'd used her proxy access, granted years ago for emergencies, to stake a claim on my home. How long had she been planning this? I remembered her voice, smooth as silk, 2 summers ago. "We're family, Helen," she'd said, her hand on Scott's shoulder as we sat by the lake. "Let me help with the paperwork. You shouldn't stress." I'd nodded, grateful, ignoring the flicker of unease in my chest. Now that moment burned, a betrayal dressed in kindness. I pressed my fingers to my temples, the pulse there pounding like a drum. Chelsea wasn't just mocking me, she was stealing my life piece by piece. I drove home, the lake a blur of gray through my windshield. My house loomed ahead, its weathered shingles a testament to years of love and loss. Inside, I poured tea, the chamomile's faint sweetness no comfort now. I spread the documents on my table, their stark numbers glaring under the lamplight. Chelsea's plan was clear: remortgage my home, siphon the funds, and leave me with nothing. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a fury I hadn't felt in years. She thought I was weak, a relic to be pushed aside. She was wrong. I needed to confront her, to see her face when I laid her lies bare. I called Scott, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Come over tonight," I said. "Both of you." He hesitated, his sure mom laced with unease. Hours later they arrived, Chelsea's heels clicking on my porch like a predator's stride. The living room felt too small, the air thick with the scent of her perfume, sharp and synthetic. Scott sat on the couch, his shoulders hunched, avoiding my eyes. Chelsea stood by the window, her smile polished but brittle. "I found something," I said, holding up the bank papers. My voice was calm, but my heart raced, each beat a countdown. "Care to explain why my house is being remortgaged, Chelsea?" Her smile faltered just for a second before she recovered. "Oh, Helen," she said, her tone dripping with pity. "You must be confused. We're protecting your assets. You've been so forgetful lately." Her words were a knife, twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream, but I held her gaze, searching for the truth behind her mask. "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice cutting through the room. I slid the documents across the table, the paper rustling like dry leaves. "This is your signature, not mine." Chelsea's eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking her composure. "You're mistaken," she said, but her voice wavered. Scott shifted, his face pale. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his words barely a whisper. I turned to him, my heart aching. "She's trying to take our home, Scott. Everything 4.8, 4.5.2 Scott. The address of the archive is Scott. The name 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 of the 439. I turned back to Chelsea, my voice steady. "I trusted you, and you used it against me." She laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "Helen, you're delusional," she said. "No one will believe you. You're just an old woman who can't keep up." Her words stung, but I held my ground, my anger a fire in my veins. "We'll see about that," I said, my voice low. Scott stood, his hands clenched. "Is this true, Chelsea?" he asked, his voice breaking. She turned to him, her face softening, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. "Scott, she's confused," she said, reaching for him. He stepped back, and for the first time I saw doubt in his eyes. My heart twisted. He was still my boy, caught in her web. I walked to my desk, pulling out the old recorder I'd kept from my teaching days. "I recorded you, Chelsea," I said, pressing play. Her voice filled the room, a snippet from last week when she'd thought I was asleep. "Helen's too old to notice," she'd said to someone on the phone. "The house is practically ours." The color drained from her face, her mask crumbling. Scott's jaw tightened, and he looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You lied," he whispered. Chelsea's eyes darted to the door, but I stepped forward, blocking her. "You're not running from this," I said, my voice steel. The room fell silent, the only sound the tick of my antique clock. I felt the weight of their stares, Scott's pain, Chelsea's fear. I wanted to collapse, to cry for the family I thought I had, but I stood tall. This wasn't over. I needed to protect my home, my legacy, and I'd fight with everything I had. But how could I face them again after this? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. What would you do if you were in Helen's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. I sat alone after they left, the lake outside a dark void. Chelsea's plan was exposed, but my heart ached for Scott, torn between us. I had the evidence, but what would I do next to stop her for good? How do you fight someone who's already taken so much? The question hung over me like the fog rolling off the lake, thick and unyielding. Chelsea's betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real, etched in the forged signature on those bank documents, her voice on my recorder admitting her greed. My Oregon home, once a sanctuary, felt like a battleground now. The cedar scent of its walls mixed with the faint must of old papers scattered across my table, each one a piece of her plan to steal my lake house. I stood by the window, the glass cold against my palm, watching the water ripple under a gray sky. I'd confronted her, seen her mask slip, but she was cunning. One wrong move and she'd twist my words, paint me as the frail old woman she wanted everyone to believe I was. How could I stop her without losing Scott forever? I couldn't do this alone. My fingers trembled as I dialed Margaret, my old friend from my teaching days. Her voice, warm and steady, cut through my fear. "Helen, come over," she said. "We'll figure this out." I grabbed my coat, the wool scratching my skin, and drove to her house, the lake's chill seeping into my bones. Margaret's porch creaked under my steps, the air heavy with the scent of brewing coffee and damp wood. She opened the door, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, ushering me inside. The warmth of her kitchen wrapped around me, the clink of mugs grounding me as she poured coffee, its bitter aroma steadying my nerves. I spilled everything, Chelsea's mockery at the bookstore, the remortgage papers, the recording. Margaret listened, her face hardening. "She's a snake," she said, her voice low. "But you're tougher than she thinks." Her words sparked something in me, a memory from 30 years ago when I'd fought the school board to save our literature program. I could still feel the weight of the podium, the heat of the spotlight, my voice steady as I defended my students' right to learn. "You stood up then," Margaret said, as if reading my mind. "You can do it now." I nodded, my resolve tightening like a fist. We spread the bank documents on her table, their stark numbers glowing under the lamplight. "She's using your trust to bleed you dry," Margaret said. "We need to lock down your assets." She suggested a trust fund, one that would protect my house and investments while supporting a cause I cared about. Women like me, older, targeted for their wealth. The idea felt right, like a shield I could wield. But I needed more evidence, something undeniable to expose Chelsea's lies. I pulled out my old recorder, its tape dusty but intact. "I've got her voice," I said, "but I need to catch her in the act." Margaret leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Set a trap," she said. "Let her think you're slipping, then record her next move." The plan was simple but risky. I'd play along with Chelsea's concern, act confused, and bait her into revealing more. My heart raced at the thought, each beat a mix of fear and defiance. "You're sure about this?" Margaret asked. I nodded, my voice firm. "She thinks I'm weak. Let's use that." I drove home, the lake's surface a dark mirror under the stars. Inside, I sat at my desk, the recorder heavy in my hands. I tested it, my voice trembling as I spoke. "This is Helen Stroud, documenting Chelsea's actions." The tape hissed, but it worked. I tucked it away, my fingers brushing the bank statements. Each document was a weapon, but I needed to be precise. One mistake, and Chelsea would turn the town against me, whispering about my senility until no one listened. The next day, I stopped at the cafe in town, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and espresso. I ordered tea, the cup warm against my hands, and listened to the chatter around me. "Chelsea's pushing for a new bookstore expansion," a woman said, her voice low. "Big money, but where's it coming from?" Another chimed in. "Poor Helen, she doesn't know what's happening." My stomach twisted, but their words fueled me. The town was watching, and Chelsea's ambition was no secret. I sipped my tea, its chamomile bitterness sharp, and felt eyes on me, curious, pitying. Let them talk. I'd show them I wasn't done yet. Back home, I reviewed the statements again, the numbers blurring under my tired eyes. My fingers traced the forged signature, Chelsea's betrayal in every loop. I imagined her smug smile, her heels clicking as she planned to take my home. But I wasn't the helpless widow she thought. I'd taught students to fight for their voices, and now I'd fight for mine. I called my lawyer, my voice steady as I outlined the trust fund. "Make it ironclad," I said. "No one touches my house." He agreed, promising to draft the papers. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, but the weight of Scott's silence lingered. Would he stand with me, or had Chelsea's lies poisoned him too? I stood by the lake, the evening air cool against my face. The water lapped at the shore, a soft rhythm that steadied my thoughts. My plan was in motion, documents secured, recorder ready, Margaret by my side. But Chelsea was clever, and one slip could unravel everything. I felt the fire in my chest, the same fire that had carried me through years of teaching, of raising Scott, of surviving loss. This was my fight, and I'd win. But would my plan be enough to outsmart her? Would my plan work? That question pulsed through me, sharp as the cold air off the lake as I stood in my living room, the weight of the moment pressing down. The scent of cedar filled my Oregon home, but it couldn't calm the storm inside me. My hands gripped the stack of documents, bank statements, the trust fund papers, my old recorder, each a piece of the trap I'd set for Chelsea. The lamplight cast shadows on the hardwood floor, flickering like my nerves. I'd played her game, acted confused, let her think I was slipping. But tonight, I'd show her who I was. My lake house, my legacy, was mine, and I'd fight to keep it. But what if Chelsea twisted this, turned Scott against me for good? I'd called them over, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. The clock ticked, each second a heartbeat as I arranged the evidence on my table. The trust fund was finalized, my assets locked away for a charity supporting women like me, older, targeted, betrayed. Margaret had helped, her calm certainty anchoring me. "You've got this, Helen," she'd said, her voice warm over the phone. I could still smell the coffee from her kitchen, its bitter edge lingering in my memory. Now, alone, I felt the weight of her words. This was my stand, and I wouldn't falter. The doorbell rang, sharp as a gunshot. I smoothed my dress, the fabric cool against my skin, and opened the door. Chelsea stepped in, her heels clicking on the floor, her perfume sharp and synthetic. Scott followed, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting to the floor. The room felt too small, the air thick with tension. "Helen, you look tired," Chelsea said, her smile a polished blade. "Everything okay?" Her concern was a lie, and I saw it now, clear as the lake under moonlight. I gestured to the table, my voice steady. "Sit, we need to talk." Chelsea raised an eyebrow but complied, her movements graceful, predatory. Scott sat beside her, silent, his hands clenched. I laid out the bank statements, the forged signature glaring under the light. "Explain this," I said, sliding the papers toward her. My heart pounded, each beat a drum of defiance. Chelsea's eyes flicked to the documents, her smile faltering. "What's this, Helen?" she asked, her tone light but strained. "You're confused again, aren't you?" "Don't," I snapped, my voice cutting through her act. "You forged my signature to remortgage my house. I have proof." I held up the recorder, its metal cold in my hand, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room, smug and careless from a call I'd captured days ago. "Helen's too old to notice. The house is practically ours." Scott's head snapped up, his face paling. Chelsea's composure cracked, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "That's not what it sounds like," she said, her voice rising. "You're twisting this, Helen." I stepped closer, my anger a fire in my veins. You used my trust, my home, my son to steal from me. But I'm not the fool you think." I tossed the trust fund papers onto the table, the rustle loud in the silence. "My assets are safe now, in a charity you can't touch. You're done." Chelsea's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she grabbed the papers. "You can't do this!" she spat, her mask gone. "No one will believe you. You're just a senile old woman." Scott stood, his voice shaking. "Chelsea, is this true?" His eyes, those same eyes I'd loved since he was a boy, were wide with pain. She turned to him, her face softening, but I saw the panic beneath. "Scott, she's lying," she said, reaching for his arm. He pulled away, and my heart ached for him, caught in her web. "I recorded her, Scott," I said, my voice softer now. "She planned this. All of it." I played another clip, her laughter cold as she mocked my fading mind. His jaw tightened, and he looked at her like a stranger. "You lied to me," he whispered, his voice breaking. Chelsea's eyes darted to the door, but I blocked her path, my stance firm. "You're not running," I said, my voice steel. "You thought I was weak, Chelsea. You were wrong." She froze, her breath hitching. For the first time, she looked small, her confidence shattered. I turned to Scott, my throat tight. "I did this for us, for our home. I'm sorry you had to see her like this." He nodded, his eyes wet. "I didn't know, Mom," he said, his voice raw. He stepped toward me, his arms wrapping around me in a hesitant embrace. I held him, the warmth of his hug a balm to my battered heart. But it wasn't over. I pulled back, facing Chelsea. "Leave," I said, "and don't come near my family again." She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky, and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The silence was heavy, broken only by Scott's uneven breaths. I sank into a chair, the weight of victory and loss crashing over me. The room smelled of cedar and tension, the lake outside glinting under the stars. I'd won, but at what cost? Scott sat across from me, his face a mix of guilt and grief. "I should have seen it," he said, his voice low. I reached for his hand, its warmth grounding me. "We'll be okay," I said, though doubt lingered. Had I saved my home only to lose him to her shadow? I stood, gathering the papers, their edges sharp against my fingers. Margaret arrived soon after, her presence a quiet strength. We finalized the trust fund details at my table, the ink's sharp scent sealing my legacy. "You did it," she said, her smile proud. I nodded, but my heart was heavy. Chelsea was gone, but her poison lingered. I walked to the window, the lake's ripples a mirror to my thoughts. I'd reclaimed my life, but what came next? If you're cheering for Helen's victory, smash that like button. What do you think about this moment of justice? Let us know in the comments. Scott stayed that night, sleeping in his old room. I stood by the lake, the air cool against my face. I'd won, but the fight had changed me. What was left for me now, after this triumph? What does victory cost? That question lingered as I sat by the lake, the morning sun glinting off its surface like scattered coins. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from my Oregon home. My hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, its warmth seeping into my palms, but it couldn't ease the ache in my chest. I'd beaten Chelsea, saved my lake house, and exposed her lies. The trust fund was secure, my legacy protected for women like me, older, betrayed, dismissed. Yet, as the lake rippled under a soft breeze, I felt hollow. Scott was still here, sleeping in his old room, but Chelsea's shadow hung between us. Had I reclaimed my home only to lose the family I'd fought for? I stood, my knees creaking, and walked to the shore. The water lapped at my boots, cool and steady, grounding me. I'd spent weeks consumed by anger, piecing together Chelsea's betrayal with bank statements and recordings. The memory of her voice, Helen's too old to notice, still stung, sharp as the wind cutting across the lake. But now, with her gone, I needed to find myself again. I closed my eyes, the distant call of a loon echoing in my ears. Who was I after this fight? Not just Scott's mother, not just a retired teacher, but something more, someone stronger than I'd ever known. I returned to the house, the cedar scent welcoming me as I stepped inside. Scott was awake, sitting at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug. The room smelled of brewed grounds, bitter and familiar. His eyes, those same eyes I'd loved since he was a boy, were heavy with guilt. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice rough. I sat across from him, the chair creaking under me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice soft but firm. He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't see her for what she was." His words were a balm, but they couldn't erase the months of silence, the times he'd let Chelsea's lies stand. I reached for his hand, its warmth a reminder of the boy I'd raised. "You were caught in her web," I said, "but you're here now." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. I squeezed his hand, my heart aching. "We start small," I said, "together." The words felt fragile, but they were a bridge, one I hoped we could cross. I remembered the day I adopted him, his small hand in mine, the weight of my husband's absence still raw. I'd promised to be his home, and I wouldn't let Chelsea's poison take that away. Later, I drove to town, the lake's shimmer fading in my rearview mirror. Margaret had invited me to a community meeting, a chance to share my story. The cafe was packed, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and espresso. Faces turned as I entered, some curious, others warm. "Helen, you're a hero," a woman said, her voice low. I smiled, but the word felt heavy. I wasn't a hero, just a woman who'd fought back. Margaret stood at the front, her gray hair catching the light. "You've started something," she said, her voice carrying over the chatter. "Your trust fund. It's giving others hope." She gestured to a stack of flyers, the words bold across them. My throat tightened. Had my pain sparked something bigger? I spoke, my voice steady despite the eyes on me. "I thought my legacy was this house," I said, the memory of Chelsea's smirk flashing in my mind. "But it's more. It's knowing your worth, no matter your age." The room erupted in applause, the sound washing over me like a wave. I felt the weight of their support, the clink of mugs and murmurs of agreement grounding me. Margaret hugged me after, her lavender scent comforting. "You're changing lives," she said. I nodded, my heart full but heavy. I'd found purpose, but Scott's pain lingered in my thoughts. Back home, I walked through town, the cobblestone streets cool under my feet. People nodded, their smiles warm, no longer tinged with pity. "Good for you, Helen," a shopkeeper called, his voice carrying over the hum of the market. I waved, feeling rooted, like the pines lining the lake. The air smelled of fresh produce and lake water, a reminder of the life I'd fought for. I passed the bookstore, its windows dark. Scott had closed it temporarily, needing time to rebuild without Chelsea's influence. I wondered if he'd find his way, or if her shadow would linger. I sat by the lake again, the evening sky painting the water in pinks and golds. The memory of the bookstore event flooded back, Chelsea's mocking words, the crowd's laughter. I'd felt so small then, my burgundy dress a target for her scorn. Now I stood taller, the lake's ripples a mirror to my strength. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, building something new from the ashes of betrayal. But as the stars emerged, I thought of Scott, still wrestling with his guilt. We were healing, but it was slow, like the lake's patient tides. I ran my fingers through the grass, its dampness cool against my skin. The town's support, Margaret's faith, my own resolve, they'd carried me here. I'd turned pain into purpose, but the journey wasn't over. I felt a fire in my chest, quieter now, but steady. I was more than Chelsea's victim, more than Scott's mother. I was Helen Stroud, and I'd found my strength. But what lesson would I carry forward from this? What lesson did you take away from Helen's journey? Share it in the comments. If this story inspired you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. I stood, the lake's breeze lifting my hair. Scott was waiting inside, and we had work to do, rebuilding trust, rebuilding us. But there was one final step, a lesson I needed to share. What was it? What's the legacy you leave behind? That question settled over me as I stood on the stage of the community center, the warm lights casting a soft glow on my velvet dress. The air smelled of polished wood and anticipation, the murmur of the crowd a gentle hum in my ears. My Oregon town had gathered for a charity gala, celebrating the trust fund I'd created for women like me, older, betrayed, dismissed. My lake house, once the target of Chelsea's greed, was safe, its value now a shield for others. But as I gripped the podium, my fingers brushing its smooth edge, I felt the weight of my journey. I'd fought, won, and found strength. But what did it all mean? What lesson would I carry forward, not just for me, but for everyone listening? I looked out at the faces, Margaret's proud smile, Scott's quiet nod from the back, strangers whose eyes held gratitude. The room felt alive, the clink of glasses and rustle of programs grounding me. I thought my legacy was my house, I began, my voice steady, echoing through the microphone. A place by the lake, filled with memories of my husband, my son, my life. But I was wrong. I paused, the memory of Chelsea's voice, too old to matter, flashing like a spark. That night at the bookstore, her laughter had cut me, her words a blade I'd carried for weeks. I could still feel the silk of my burgundy dress, the crowd's pitying stares. But now, standing here, I was whole. My legacy isn't brick or wood, I continued, my heart swelling. It's the strength to say no, to stand up when someone tries to define your worth. Kindness doesn't mean letting others walk over you. The crowd nodded, a woman in the front wiping her eyes. I thought of the Oregon Sunlight Tribune article, its headline bold, "Elder Financial Coercion Fought by Local Hero." The hashtag had spread, shared by people I'd never met. My fight had become theirs, a ripple across the lake of our town. Margaret approached after my speech, her lavender scent wrapping around me as she hugged me. "You've changed everything," she said, her voice thick with pride. I smiled, my throat tight. "I just told the truth," I said. She shook her head. "You gave them courage." Her words landed softly, like the lake's tides on a calm day. I glanced at Scott, standing by the exit, his hands in his pockets. We were healing, but it was slow, each conversation a step toward trust. I'd forgiven him, but the scars of Chelsea's betrayal lingered. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. The town square glowed with string lights, laughter spilling from the gala. I walked to a bench, the wood rough under my fingers, and sat, watching the stars reflect on the lake. A charity representative had thanked me earlier, her voice warm as she described the women my trust would help. "You're giving them a voice," she'd said. I'd nodded, but her words echoed now, mingling with the soft lapping of the water. My fight wasn't just for me, it was for every woman who'd been dismissed, manipulated, silenced. I returned home, the cedar scent of my lake house welcoming me. In my study, I pulled out a notebook, its pages crisp under my touch. I began writing, not a speech, but a plan, to mentor others, to share my story, to teach women how to protect their worth. The ink's sharp smell filled the air, each word a promise. I thought of Chelsea, her smirk, her lies. She'd tried to break me, but she'd forged me instead. I wasn't just Helen Stroud, retired teacher, adoptive mother. I was a force, and I'd keep fighting. I walked to the lake one last time, the grass damp under my feet. The water stretched before me, a dark mirror under the moon. I stood tall, my reflection steady. The gala's applause, Margaret's faith, Scott's tentative steps back to me. They were my strength now. I'd thought my house was my legacy, but it was this, the courage to reclaim my value, to show others they could too. My heart was full, not with anger, but with hope. The lake whispered, its tides a song of peace, and I smiled, ready for whatever came next.